Think about the last time you opened your phone and just scrolled. Someone announced a promotion. Someone posted a birthday dinner. Someone shared a sunset with a caption about gratitude. And you looked at all of it. You took it in. Maybe you even felt something, a small flicker of warmth, or something quieter and harder to name. And then you put your phone down. And you said nothing. You posted nothing. You shared nothing. You just moved on with your day. Nobody saw that moment. Nobody double tapped it. Nobody left a comment saying this. And somehow that was fine. Somehow that felt like exactly the right amount of noise for the world to have about your life. But here you are now, listening to this. Which means somewhere, in some part of you, you've wondered about it. Why you're the way you are. What it says about you. Whether it's strange to live your whole life and leave almost no trace of it online. This is for you, not as an explanation, not as a diagnosis, just as a conversation late at night between two people who know what it's like to live quietly in a very loud world. Take a breath. We're going to go somewhere honest together. You know the pattern. You've seen it in yourself 100 times, even if you've never quite put words to it. Your birthday comes and you don't post about it. Something wonderful happens, maybe a trip, a meal, a moment where the light came through the window exactly right, and you feel it fully, completely, and then you let it pass without documenting it. Someone asks, "Why aren't you on Instagram?" Or, "I never see you post anything." And you smile, and you say something like, "I just prefer to keep things private." And that's true, but it's also not the whole truth, and somewhere inside you, you know it. You watch other people share. You watch them announce and celebrate and grieve publicly. You watch them turn their lives into content. And you don't judge them. You genuinely don't. But you also can't imagine doing it yourself. The thought of it feels like something between vulnerability and exposure, like undressing in a room full of strangers. So you stay quiet. You observe. You hold your life close, like something fragile that the world might not handle with enough care. You're not antisocial. People who know you well know that. You laugh loudly with the people you trust. You text long messages at 2 a.m. You remember things about others that they forgot they ever told you. You are deeply, profoundly present in the lives of the people you choose. You're just not present in the feed. And that difference between real presence and performed presence, that's the thing worth sitting with tonight. Here's what most people don't say about this, and what the science has only recently started to name. There's a certain kind of person who, early in life, learned that visibility is not safe, not dangerous in the dramatic sense, not traumatic in ways that get talked about, but unsafe in a quieter, more persistent way. Unsafe in the way that means, when you are seen, something is expected of you. When you are seen, you become a version of yourself that has to be maintained. When you are seen, the distance between who you are and who you are supposed to be becomes very apparent very fast. Maybe you grew up in a home where emotions were performed rather than felt, where people kept up appearances, where the outside of the family looked polished while the inside was something different entirely. Maybe you learned from that, absorbed it without knowing that what you show to the world is a kind of negotiation, a transaction, and transactions require something in return. Or maybe it was simpler than that. Maybe you were just sensitive, deeply sensitive, in a world that moved too fast and too loud for sensitive people, and you found that keeping things private felt like the only way to protect what was actually real. Psychologists have a term for this. They call it avoidant self-presentation. But before you latch onto the label, understand what it actually means in the body. It means you learned, somewhere along the way, that sharing yourself openly carries a cost you're not sure you can pay. It means the idea of posting a photo and waiting to see how many people validate it feels not just uncomfortable but vaguely threatening, like standing on a scale in front of an audience. It means you'd rather feel things fully in private than feel them partially in public. That's not pathology. That's a learned response to a real environment. And understanding where it came from is the first step toward deciding whether it's still serving you. Here's where it gets more interesting and more complicated, because it's not just about privacy, it's about control. and not in a manipulative way, in a deeply human way. When you don't post, you control the narrative of your life. Nobody can misinterpret a photo you didn't take. Nobody can read a caption you didn't write. Nobody can project meaning onto a moment you kept to yourself. Your life remains, in some fundamental way, yours, unedited, unfiltered, not subject to the interpretation of people who only know the two-dimensional version of you. And there's something beautiful about that. Genuinely beautiful. But here's the twist. The same mechanism that protects you from misinterpretation also protects you from connection. The same wall that keeps out the noise keeps out the signal too. You control so tightly what people see that sometimes, even the people who love you don't fully know what's happening inside you. Not because you're dishonest, because you've gotten so good at managing the distance between your inner life and your outer presentation that even in relationships there's always a slight gap, a held back portion, a room in the house that stays locked. This shows up in ways you might recognize, in how you deflect personal questions with humor, in how you share vulnerabilities only after the moment has passed and the feeling is safely behind you, in how you edit yourself, not to deceive but to maintain a kind of sovereignty over your own story. Psychologists call this tendency self-concealment, and research by Dr. James Pennebaker in the late 1980s found something counterintuitive. The act of not sharing, especially emotional content, is cognitively and physically taxing, not because sharing is inherently healthy, but because holding carries weight. The body keeps score, not just of trauma, but of all the small things we chose to carry alone. Here's the part that rarely gets said. Pause for a moment there, let that sit. You might have started keeping things to yourself as a form of protection. And it worked. But somewhere along the way, the protection became a habit. And the habit became an identity. And the identity, I'm a private person, became so solid, so real, that you stopped checking whether it was still true. You stopped asking whether you actually want to keep things private, or whether you've simply forgotten what it feels like not to. What saved you then may be quietly limiting you now. There's a particular kind of loneliness that belongs to private people, and it's not the loneliness of being alone. You're probably fine being alone. You might actually love it. This is a different kind. It's the loneliness of being surrounded by people who see you clearly, who like you genuinely, but who are holding a version of you that's missing some key pieces. It's the loneliness of being known, but not fully known, of being understood, but only up to a certain depth. Nobody really knows me, and I don't know if I'd let them even if they wanted to. That line, read it again, because that's the quiet confession of a person who has lived so long inside their own careful sovereignty that intimacy has started to feel like a threat rather than a gift. Not because intimacy is bad, because vulnerability has been associated, somewhere deep in the nervous system, with loss of control, with becoming something you didn't consent to become, with being seen in a way that doesn't feel like being seen at all. Social media is just the stage where this plays out most visibly. But it's not really about social media. It was never about social media. The feed is just the symptom. The root goes deeper, down into the place where you first decided that it was safer to hold your life close than to let other people hold it with you. And that decision, that small, quiet, reasonable decision made probably without words and probably very young, that decision has shaped everything since. How you love, how you work, how you receive praise and deflect it, how you sit with your own accomplishments in the silence and wonder why they don't feel like enough, because there was no one there to witness them. Here's the thing about witnessing. Humans are wired for it, not for validation, not for applause, for witnessing, for someone to see a thing and say, I know, I see that was real. And when you keep your life private in a way that removes even the possibility of being witnessed, something in you goes quietly hungry, for years, sometimes for decades, and you feed it with solitude and philosophy and the deep intimacy of your own inner life, and those things are genuinely nourishing. They are, but they are not the same thing as being known. This is the most honest, most painful thing in this entire script. You are not too private to be loved. You are too afraid to find out. Let that breathe. So what now? Not, how do you fix it? Because you don't fix it the way you fix a broken thing. You move toward it the way you'd move toward something you've been avoiding for a long time. Slowly, with some curiosity, without requiring yourself to be different than you are. The first thing worth understanding is that your privacy is not a flaw. It is not something to be ashamed of. It is a language that developed for reasons that once made complete sense. You do not have to speak a different language. You just might want to expand your vocabulary. What would it look like to share one small true thing? Not on social media necessarily, that's not the point. But with one person, in one conversation, one genuine piece of something you would normally hold back. Not a confession, not a performance of vulnerability, just a small, honest moment offered to someone you trust. This is hard for me to say. Those 5 words might be the most courageous sentence available to you right now. There's a concept in psychology called earned secure attachment. It describes the process by which someone who grew up without reliable emotional safety learns, through consistent relationships and intentional self-reflection, to access the feelings of security and trust that were absent early on. It is called earned, precisely, because it doesn't come automatically. It comes from showing up repeatedly in relationships that feel unsafe and discovering, slowly, that safety is sometimes available after all. You don't have to become an open book. You don't have to perform your inner life for an audience, but you might consider, gently, whether the version of yourself that never lets people in has been running on an old rule. A rule that was written in a different time, for a different world, by a younger version of you who didn't have the experience yet to know that some people, not all, but some, can be trusted with the real thing. That younger version deserves some compassion, not some patronizing, distant compassion. Real compassion, the kind you'd offer to a child who learned to be small in order to survive a space that was too big and too unpredictable. They did what made sense. They built walls because walls worked, and now you get to decide, not whether to tear the walls down, but whether to put a door in one of them. Not every room has to be open, but maybe one door, maybe one person, maybe one honest sentence in a conversation you would normally have kept surface level. That's not vulnerability as performance, that's vulnerability as practice. Here's where we land. Not at a resolution because life doesn't resolve. Not at a solution because this wasn't a problem to be solved. Here's where we land. At an image. Think of someone you know who posts everything. Every meal, every sunset, every small victory. And think about how you've sometimes felt watching that. Not jealous, exactly. Something more like wistful. Like watching someone do a thing you don't know how to do. Like watching someone be unafraid in a way that you can't quite access. Now think about what those posts are, at their core. They are someone saying, "This happened to me, and I want you to know it. This moment was real, and I want to mark it. This life is mine, and I want to leave some trace of it in the world." You want that too. You do. You want your life to have been real and known and witnessed. You want the people who matter to know what happened to you. You want to leave traces. The difference is that you've decided, or decided on your behalf, that the cost of leaving traces is too high, that what you'd receive in return wouldn't be worth what you'd have to give. And maybe that's been true in some contexts. Maybe you've been burned. Maybe you've shared and been misunderstood. Maybe you've been vulnerable and had it used against you. Maybe you've posted one small thing and felt the quiet humiliation of being ignored. Those experiences are real, they count, but they are not the only data available to you. Maybe I've been so focused on not being hurt that I forgot to ask whether I was happy. Let that sentence do what it needs to do. You are not too far gone for this. You are not broken in a way that is unrepairable. You have not missed your window. The person inside you who wants to be known is still there, still waiting, still quietly hoping that someone will ask the right question at the right moment, and that you'll answer honestly, just this once. That moment doesn't have to be a post. It doesn't have to be a story or a reel or a caption. It can be a phone call, a letter, a long walk with someone you trust where you say something you've never said out loud before. It can be this, you, sitting with this script, recognizing yourself in it and deciding that recognition is enough for tonight. There are two kinds of invisible. There is invisible because nobody sees you, and there is invisible because you have chosen very deliberately to live below the surface. The first kind is painful. The second kind can be peaceful, or it can be a hiding place, and only you know which one yours has become. You don't have to answer that tonight, but you might want to hold the question for a while. Let it walk around with you. Let it be uncomfortable in the way that honest questions are uncomfortable. Because questions like that, the ones that feel like they're about social media but are actually about everything, those are the questions worth living with, worth sitting with at midnight, in the quiet, in the kind of conversation that doesn't need an audience. The world has enough noise. You have always known that. What you're learning now, slowly, in your own time, is that silence and solitude are not the same thing as being alone, and privacy is not the same thing as peace. And keeping your life close is not the same thing as living it fully. You opened your phone tonight and scrolled. Someone announced a promotion. Someone posted a birthday dinner. Someone shared a sunset with a caption about gratitude. And you felt something you probably didn't post about, but you felt it. And somewhere, in the space between feeling and sharing, between living and being witnessed, between the life you actually have and the life anyone else can see, that's where you live. That's always been where you live. Maybe that place is lonelier than you've admitted. Maybe it's more beautiful than anyone else has ever seen. Probably it's both, and maybe the most radical thing you could ever do, not for the world, not for the feed, but for yourself, is to let someone stand in that space with you. Just once. Just long enough to know that the realest parts of your life don't have to disappear just because nobody took a picture. Some things are real precisely because they were never performed. Some lives are full precisely because they were never displayed. And some people are deeply, profoundly themselves, not despite the silence, but inside it. You put your phone down, the day kept going, nobody liked it, nobody shared it. It still happened, it was still yours. And that quietly is enough.